Hi, it's Ben from My Cycling Coach. I hope you're well and that you're having a great day. I wanted to do a quick video on the page review today to discuss the biggest mistake that I see cyclists making when they sign up to a Sportive or Gran Fondo. Now, I find what tends to happen is as soon as that date gets in the diary, the following weekend, cyclists then tend to just start going out at the weekend and performing the longest and hardest rides that they can do possible to try and prepare for that then. And what can be the problem with this is that ride will really, you will accumulate a lot of fatigue through that ride. You may have not really done any training previously, and then straight away you're going out and trying to do these real big rides. If your Sportive or Gran Fondo is maybe, 100 miles, maybe around that sort of distance, straight away going out, trying to do that distance without doing any previous training, you're going to start to really accumulate a lot of fatigue. Or even if you have been doing a little bit of training and not really that distance beforehand. So what can tend to happen is you're going out, you're doing these rides, but it can be taking you almost the whole week to then recover. And then you'll do the same the following weekend, and you sort of get into this sort of training routine. I mean, if you can call it training, where you're just going out of the weekend, as I say, doing those long rides, doing them as hard as you can. And you're just having to then take the weekend or the whole week off. And this isn't probably the most effective way to train because you're then missing out on quality sessions. You'll train at the weekend, you'll accumulate that sort of training stimulus, you will fatigue the body, which you do need for training. But if you're then having to leave it sort of another 5 or 6 days before you then can train again, you won't really find that you'll probably progress as much as you want to, or be with the sort of fitness and form that you want to be at when you do then eventually go to do your Sportive or Gran Fondo. Now, another problem that I often see when doing these sort of longer rides at the weekend, when you're trying to prepare for these events, is the zone, if you like, that you're riding in, or the intensity that you're riding at. And what can tend to happen is, if you're not really following any structure, is let's just say maybe you're going out and you're doing a 100-mile ride at the weekend. You're probably spending a lot of that ride in what we call your tempo zone. So this is really the zone that you probably can maintain, or you're trying to ride at, because you are just trying to ride as hard as you can for maybe those 4, 5, 6 hours. And when you sort of sit in that middle zone, you're not really getting a real good sort of quality training stimulus from the session. You're not really building any endurance, sort of an aerobic base, because you're sort of riding at a too high a zone, and you're not really working that top end fitness either, which is what we see more from the threshold and maybe VO2 max work, or when you are at a higher zone. And you just can't really ride at that intensity for these durations. So that ride, you will spend, as I say, a lot of time in tempo. You will see a few improvements from this, but again, if you're just doing this one ride a week in that tempo zone, you won't see as much improvement, and you will plateau very quickly. Another thing with a tempo zone is you will just really accumulate a lot of fatigue and not get much sort of bang for your buck from riding in that zone the whole time. So what can we do to improve this? Now, the first tip, I've got 3 tips for you today on how to really maybe structure things a little bit differently and maximize your preparation and the effectiveness of your preparation for your Sportives and Gran Fondos. You may be finding that you're following a similar structure at the minute to what I've just mentioned there. So the first tip is to, firstly, if you haven't done so, perform a functional threshold test, just so you can identify some training zones. Now, you can do this by tracking either power or heart rate. I would recommend just doing a field-based test, maybe a 20-minute all-out effort at that sort of what we would say would be around your threshold. If you track either power or heart rate, you're going to be able to work out some averages there and determine a half decent set of training zones aligned with either heart rate or power, which you can then use to start training more accurately, determine those zones and structure some quality sessions from. So that's tip number 1. Tip number 2 then is to keep doing your longer rides at the weekend. There's nothing wrong with going out and doing 100 miles, 3, 4, 5 or even 6 hour ride at the weekend, but just try to knock the intensity down a little bit if you can, and focus on riding more within what we call zone 2. Now, this zone, spending a lot of time in it, really allows you to develop your aerobic work capacity allows the body to become a lot more efficient at riding in what we call maybe endurance zone, where you will be getting those endurance benefits, and is probably the zone that you're going to spend a lot of time in when you're doing that Gran Fondo or Sportive. So the better you can get at working aerobically, spending time in that zone and riding at that intensity, the more efficient, the better you are then going to perform on the day of your Sportive or Gran Fondo, but also just see real good general improvements in your fitness and have a real sound aerobic base, which we all really need as cyclists, certainly if you are doing 100-mile rides quite frequently. So keep doing your long rides, but just make it a little bit more structured. Zone 2 for you may start to feel, when you initially do that, very slow. But if you can be patient with it and build this Zone 2 work up over a 2-3 month period before doing maybe your Sportive or Gran Fondo, you will really see the benefits of being able to work in that zone and really ride at a good steady intensity and a good steady pace there. So that's tip number 2. Tip number 3 then is, if you've been doing tip number 2 correctly and spending time in that Zone 2, what you will then find is you'll be a lot fresher than going into the week as well. So instead of having to maybe take the whole week off to recover from doing what I mentioned initially there, riding really hard as you can for 100 miles and then having a lot of fatigue. Another great thing about the Zone 2 riding is you won't accumulate as much fatigue, meaning that you can then spend or put some time in and plan some good quality sessions in during the week, where you can then do some structured intervals. I would recommend as tip number 3 that you do 2 shorter, higher intensity sessions during the week. One of these would be in your threshold zone, where you're accumulating some time at threshold, some structured time there. Build out some intervals. Threshold tends to be between, sort of interval lengths tend to be between 8 and 30 minutes in length, so you could build out some there. And the other session, the other higher intensity session, if you're doing 2 a week, should be a VO2 max focus session. These interval lengths can be anything from 30 seconds to even 8 minutes. 8 minutes, when you get to there, you do start to go into more that sort of threshold zone. But just by then having those 2 sessions, this is allowing you to work what we call more of your top end, which is going to really allow you to improve fitness, improve your ability to produce power, improve what we call that functional threshold, and really bring up that fitness. And then you will see all of your zones should then shift upwards, certainly with power as well through doing that. So the intensity that you were riding at before doing maybe 4 weeks of structured training will then increase through that increase in FTP. This means that you're going to be able to ride at a higher zone in Zone 2 as well. So you'll see an increase in speed there as well. It's just a lot more efficient way to train, rather than spending a lot of time what we call in that middle zone tempo, accumulating fatigue. So yeah, just wanted to do that video on the page today. A mistake I see a lot of the time, and as I say, if you've been doing some of those things where you are just going out one ride at the weekend, giving it your all there, and then having to take a week off, not the most effective way to train. So give some of those things a go there that I've mentioned. I hope they help. If you found the video useful, please, as always, drop a like on the video. Feel free to follow, share, subscribe, and any comments, as always, I would love to hear from you. Have a great rest of your day, enjoy your riding, and speak soon.